Today, we're going to have a conversation, and for those of you who are interested in domestic relations personally and have a matter that has either transpired already and you're angry and want to know what happened, or you want to know how to prepare, this is going to be perhaps one of the most important conversations that you will ever have. If you don't participate, the probability is about 99.9% that you're going to lose, and lose big. You're going to lose on custody issues, and those are the things that we are most concerned about. Access to your children and an opportunity to continue to act out your role as a parent. If you want to do that in a meaningful way, this is going to be critically important. For several years, people have approached me and talked about the possibilities for doing something like what we're doing here today, which is to provide a video so that the kind of consultation that I've provided for fathers that have been extremely useful and helpful to them can be available to a much wider audience. So we're going to try to do this on film. I'm not sure it's the best thing, but it's probably better than anything else that you're likely to ever have an opportunity to access. So we're going to talk about some of this, and hopefully by the time you see this, we will have figured out a way to communicate to you some things about my credibility. After all, why should you care what I have to say or what I think on the subject? Well, the bottom line is you ought to care, because in as humble a fashion as I can, I have to tell you that there's nobody out there, anywhere in the United States, that's going to be able to give you anything more valuable than what I'm going to give you in 2 or 3 different segments. This is going to be an introductory part to get you accustomed to what you're about to go into if you have in some way become involved with the court system and it affects your life, your family life, dealing with children and possibly divorce, but in any case where there's some kind of custodial relationship issues that are before the court. If that's true, and I'm assuming that it is, but otherwise, why are you listening? You are in for some serious experiences that you are not going to like. They are not good. From top to bottom, most everybody that you are going to interact with, whether you realize it or not, are woefully inept in their jobs. There are very few people I've ever encountered in the 20-year plus period that I've been involved in this who seem to really have a grasp of what it is that they are doing. They know how to do some mechanical things. Sometimes they have a little bit of an understanding about legal filing mechanisms, or they may know something about psychological social work, or they may know something about the legal system, and they may have some aspect of understanding about constitutional law. But when you start looking at the big picture of all the components that come into play in this particular arena, most of them don't have any clue about the other folks, and what they do think they know, they don't. It's wrong. And one of the reasons is because this system is not designed to do what anyone thinks that it's designed to do. It is not about providing justice to anyone, not to mothers, not to fathers, and certainly not to children. It is designed to resolve a conflict, to get it over as easy as they possibly can, and then you layer on top of it some other issues that when we get into it are going to make you want to pull your hair out. Because the thing that drives this system more than anything else is a body of people in Washington who are concerned about welfare payback. They want to get money back from the states, from the parents, that goes to them to pay back welfare monies they've extended. Now, you may be asking yourself, what has that got to do with me? I'm not on welfare. My spouse isn't on welfare. My children aren't on welfare. And no one here is ever going to be on welfare in all likelihood. So what has that got to do with me? It's because those people have billions of dollars at their disposal. They have, over the years, expended those monies in ways that have created this massive bureaucracy from one coast to the other, from Canada to the border of Mexico. Every state, every county, there are thousands of employees who are driven by this system. They don't function without money. The sums are huge. So anything they can do to reduce that money load and strain on their system, they like. And that drives the policies, and those policies are going to affect all of you, not just the ones that were on welfare. So that's what you're up against. And every time there's a discussion about policies and politics and changes in the law that deal with family, all of those bureaucrats come to bear, or at least in some fashion. There's always some of them there. And they have all day long to spend developing suggested changes to ideas that you or others may have had about how to do this well, because doing it well will somehow reduce the number of dollars that they get back into their coffers. And then they will in turn take some of those, and when we're talking about those, we're talking about hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. They're going to then send back to each county and state, and bureaucracies there depend on that money. So you see, it drives all of the policies, because there's no organization, I don't care if it's in the National Organization of Women, I don't care if it's the NRA, I don't care if it's the Insurance Agents of America. Nobody has that kind of resources that they have. And they are driven by a narrow set of objectives, and it's all about money and getting it back. So anything that they do is going to be designed to get it, and they don't care that it ruins your life. It doesn't, they don't believe it, but they really don't even understand how it does. So that's what you're up against, and why at sometimes you're going to want to pull your hair out and say, why would somebody do this to me? It's not because they sat there and were interested in you. They just wanted a policy that made sure that they got as much money as they could, and they got it from you. So these issues that I'm going to talk to you about are not about money, not by and large, but it's money that drives things about your access to your children, what you can do, what you can't do, when you can see them, how often you can see them, or whether you get to see them at all. It's all driven by these kinds of people, and any policy that someone thought of that might have made things better for you and your kids, if it had any negative impact on those dollars, you can count on the fact that there were thousands of people, a virtual army of bureaucrats, that came down into that system and demanded that you not accept this policy change that would make your life better, because it'll cost them $1.50. When you start adding up the $1.50 to every county in the United States, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and they don't want that to happen. So that helps to explain why some of these bad things that I'm going to tell you about actually happen. That's what's driving it. And you're not going to change it. You're going to have to deal with the world as it is. So let me help you in some regards. I'm going to give you some general tips, and then on our website, we're going to have some subtopics that you will be able to click on through a link that will really focus on that part of your life that you're involved in right now. It may be the earliest part of the proceedings, something's just about to happen, and we'll have a link about that. Or at least that's the way we're designing this. We're also going to have something about how to deal with your attorney and that kind of thing, because that's critical. Mostly, when you look to attorneys, you're going to be very distressed to hear this message. You're going to be paying a very large amount of money, and you're not going to get anything for it of any real value in almost every case. The vast majority of all attorneys representing parents, mothers or fathers, in these custody cases, divorce cases, domestic relations, whether they're trying to take kids away from an abusive parent, in almost all of those cases, these people are virtually incompetent. Now, it's not that they don't know anything, but what they know is of very little value to you. It's of value to them. That means they know how to file the form that the judge wants to have filed. They know how to make sure that things are done on time, but they never really get to the sum and substance of your problem. They talk around it and they think that they do, but the reality is, if you look after the fact at what they didn't do the things that they should have been doing if in fact they were trying to get some sense of fairness for you. They might have written a number of really stinging letters that made you feel great because it really told the other attorney that you hate things that you want them to hear. But the reality is, it doesn't change your life one bit. All it does is drive up your bill and doesn't affect, in the final analysis, whether you're going to have access to your kids or whether you're not. Whether you're going to have to pick them up and drop them off, or whether you're going to share those responsibilities, all those kinds of issues won't be impacted by what these lawyers do in the least. Now, keep in mind, most of these people are so incompetent and so ignorant, they aren't even aware that they're incompetent and ignorant, which is really shameful, but it's true. I've rarely encountered an attorney that really knew. And we're going to talk about some things that'll give you an opportunity to test that. For instance, if you have received a document, you've been served, if you will, and you've been told that you are the defendant in a particular court matter dealing with children, you're probably going to go and talk with an attorney. Now, here's one of the things that you can do right up front, and that is to give them a little questionnaire. You can do it orally or you can do it in writing, and simply ask them, how many cases have you handled representing a father where someone was trying to interfere with their ability to access their children through the kind of visitation or custody that they want, where you as an attorney represented this person, took them all the way through a trial, and got a win. The father got what he wanted. I'm not talking about something where they negotiate a settlement. I'm talking about a win where a judge decides, for example, we're giving custody to the father, and the mother will have visitation even though the mother wants custody. The answer in almost every case is going to be never. Now that should wake you up. What? Never? You've never won that kind of a case? No. Why? Because most of these attorneys have never gone through a custody trial. Not once in their career have they gone through an entire custody trial. There are exceptions, but don't worry about the exceptions. It's not going to apply to you. You're going to be the rule. your attorney that you go and talk to the first time is going to tell you, if they tell you the truth, admit that has never happened to them. That means they don't even know how to prepare a case because they've never done it. Well, why are you hiring them if you're not hiring them to prepare your case to win in court at a trial? I would also ask them, how many cases have they prepared? Witnesses for their client so that there is a body of evidence prepared for trial on each and every one of the dozen or so factors that are used by the court to determine what is in the best interest of the child. The best interest of the child, after all, is the standard used for determining how custody comes out, in theory at least. But what you think of with respect to what's in the best interest of the child is not what they're thinking. What's in the best interest of the child to them is the sum and substance of about a dozen factors that are written in the statute. These factors are all very vague, with perhaps one exception, but by and large they go to such things as the school and community of the child, the love and affection of the competing parties with respect to the child, things that by and large you cannot measure. You cannot measure them with any specificity. All you can basically do is get into these vague generalities. They try to use things that they call science, but by and large it's not science because it can't be measured and it can't be duplicated. It's one person's opinion. And by and large, those people's opinions are very similar to the situation where you have a wino who is deranged and starts doing brain surgery on people near death lying in an alley, and after having done 20 or 30, coming to the conclusion that he is now an experienced brain surgeon who has expertise because he's done a lot of them. Doing something but not knowing what you're doing does not make you an expert. And indeed, by and large, there are no experts in the field of mental health. They can't measure these things. Now, if you're talking about people who take drugs, they do have some things to say about that, but we're not talking about that here, by and large. Most of these cases do not center around children who have such severe psychosis problems that we're dealing with medical technicians or physicians. We're dealing usually with somebody who has either got a PhD in clinical psychology or a master's in social work. And that does not make them an expert who is in a position to give testimony about what is true about children and what's in their best interest. They don't know, and they can't measure. There are as many opinions on that question as it regards you as there are mental health professionals who have taken a look at it. Every one of them will have a different opinion. That means there isn't any right answer. And there can't be. And if there isn't, the only reason they're there is because if the judge is ever put in the unlikely position that there's a trial and he can't force these people into a settlement, that he or she has to make a decision over the objections of these parties and determine what's in the best interest. So because you have all of these vague criteria, they don't want to be made to look like fools and have their decision overturned in the Court of Appeals. So they want to be able to rely on something they call expert testimony. So they like to get recommendations. This is the kind of foolishness that you're going to be up against, but you have to be willing to play the game. So if there's going to be a mental health professional, then you've got to find one that understands this game as well as anybody and knows how to go in there and say, what you just heard from this other mental health professional is hogwash and cannot be backed up scientifically in any way to undermine it. And then they can tell you that, for instance, something that is valid. They can tell you, we didn't see any signs that are red flags classically to some kind of mental disorder. That they can do. But what they can't tell you is there is a mental disorder. They can tell you that, but it's not something they can back up scientifically. It's a hunch. It's a suggestion. It's a guess. And as I say, you can bring in 25 different mental health professionals and you're going to get 25 different decisions about that subject. So that's going to be true about each and every one of these. If that's true, imagine the difficult position you're going to be in if you've got an attorney who's never even examined this. And they're going to, for the most part, admit to you, no, they've never actually prepared expert witnesses for a divorce trial. So that's number two. They don't have any experience there either. So you might ask them, have you ever taken an appeal to the Court of Appeals in one of these kind of cases on behalf of a father and won? And they're going to tell you no, because it's a very small minority of people who have ever taken a case to the Court of Appeals. And if you ask them, have they ever gone to the Supreme Court in the state of Michigan or your state, the answer is similarly going to be, oh no, they wouldn't even have the first idea. They've never been to the Supreme Court in their state. That's going to be the truth in most cases when you consult an attorney, but they are not going to be shy about asking you for thousands and thousands of dollars to represent you in your case. The problem is they're representing the system. They're not really representing you, because what they're doing is not leading to the trial and the ultimate outcome that you're seeking. They're just going through the motion of filing documents that are used by the court to excuse themselves when they don't give you what you're looking for. That is not why you're paying them this money, and you shouldn't pay them the money. I'm not going to get into all of that, but frankly, as far as I'm concerned, there's a huge class action sitting out there for some aggressive young attorney who's real bright, who ought to be able to bring an action against virtually every attorney in the country that's representing people in domestic relations cases for taking money under false pretenses, because they don't know what they're doing and they're not doing what they need to do. For instance, you should always ask every attorney, have you ever asked the court to give your client a trial date in a case where you were representing the father? My guess is if they answer that question truthfully, it's also going to be, no, I never really got a trial date. But guess what? There's hundreds of fathers out there who hired these people and thought they were actually getting ready to go to court to have a trial where somebody was going to intercede and undo these unfair and unjust things that have happened. But that isn't true. It's not going to happen. The vast majority of all of you out there who are listening to this are going to lose. The only access that you're likely to have with your children will be whatever the custodial mother decides she's willing to provide you. Now that's true if you haven't seen this video and you haven't taken some advice from us. If you do, you will increase your chances dramatically. That is based on one huge caveat. But I think the caveat's going to apply to most of your cases. That caveat is as follows. It assumes that you are a normal, average father who loves his children, provides for his children, and lived with his children in a positive, traditional family home. If that's the case, the probability that you should be able to be successful in ensuring that you have very heavy involvement in your children's lives from now until the time that they graduate from high school are very high. But that's only if you do your job right and you get a good attorney and you take charge of your case. Now, we're going to have some information for you about how to do that. But one of the important things is that you get in your mind right now that when you meet with your attorney, that you're going to be in charge of this case, not the attorney. That doesn't mean that you're going to tell them how to do each and every thing, because they do know how to file forms. That's the one thing that they did figure out after law school, is how to file these forms and how to do it on time. What they didn't learn was to look at the end objective, which in your case is probably going to be, I want joint physical and joint legal custody. That is to say, I want to share these responsibilities with the woman who is the mother of these children. And I want to have reasonably equal access to these children so that I can be a meaningful part of their life. If you know that, and that's what you want, then it's going to be imperative that you inform this lawyer that that's why you're hiring them, and you will decide these kind of things. Now, the next thing is you want to ensure that the attorney knows that you expect that they will not meet with the judge in your case ever without you being present. No in-chambers meetings with the judge and your attorney and the other person's attorney, because if you knew what went on in those meetings, you would not be a person that we would ever want to lend a firearm to, because the probability is you'd be so enraged you'd want to use it. They engage in practices that they think are cute, where they come up with strategies for leveraging you and the mother of these children into settling the case in a way that you don't want it settled. But by the time they're done with you, they will convince you you don't have any chance of winning at all in this case, and this is the best deal you're going to get. Well, the reality is the only reason that's true in most cases is because the attorney never did their job. If they did their job, you do have a chance. Because here's the reality. Of all these factors in the Child Custody Acts that are the prevailing statute and the most important one in deciding custody in the various states, they're fairly uniform, and when these cases are held, if you apply those factors to most families, any reasonable person is going to conclude, there's really no way to determine that this father or this mother is better as a custodian of the children than the other one. Not in a reasonable way. You'll have people who have prejudices, and they'll just say, oh, well, mothers make better parents, but they don't have any evidence to support it, and certainly not in these particular cases. And all you have to do is ask yourself the simple question. If your opposition parent were to die in an automobile accident, a tragedy, do you really think anybody's going to come in and try to stop the court from ensuring that these children are in your custody? Of course not. The reality is it's very difficult to prove differences. But there's one factor that you're going to be able to prove if you've done your job right and your attorney does theirs. You're going to have a trial, and at that trial you're going to find out that you're basically equal, with one exception. And that is that you are the parent who has demonstrated to the court that you are more concerned about ensuring that those children have a meaningful parent-child relationship between themselves and the other parent. And the other parent's usually not going to have that in their favor. They're going to be the person that's trying to disrupt things and trying to keep you from the children. That's not in their best interest.